Yes, thanks for clicking the record button there, Irene. That's fantastic. So my name's Kylie Black. I work with the Australian Research Data Commons. I'm one of a few people who are going to co-present this session today. So lovely to see you all from around the world. We're here today to talk about establishing the understanding and capturing the uptake of digital research infrastructure interest group. First thing we need is a catchy title, I think. So thank you everybody for joining in today. Okay, so just as a reminder, you may have seen this slide before, a huge welcome to new members of the RDA. And just a reminder that our RDA work does need to comply with these 6 guiding principles. So hopefully you've already got access to the collaborative notes document. We are going to be using that a lot today. If not, we've got a QR code there and the link is being posted in the chat. Please add your details to the table at the top of the document and do keep it open because we're going to use it a lot in the next little while. So here in Australia, one thing we like to do is do an acknowledgement of country. So we like to acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose lands we live and work and play. For me, that's the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people. I'm in Perth in Western Australia. And we like to say we pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging. So I'd welcome you to put an acknowledgement of traditional owners of your country, if that's appropriate, into the chat if you'd like to do so. So what we're going to cover today. So I'll give a bit of a background of this group to people who haven't come across our group before. It is fairly new. We've got 2 lightning talks planned for you by 2 people who were original OG members of the RDA Technical Advisory Board, as it happens. So Andrew Trelaw, who's with the Australian Research Data Commons as well. And also for an international perspective, we also have Françoise Genova, who you may have seen in other RDA sessions already. She seems to be every single one I look at, which is fantastic. Most of our session today is going to be discussing a group charter, and we have several questions that we would like to work on as a group. So we'll be looking at risk scenarios and cases, the objectives and outcomes, our milestones and goals to get us started for the first 12 months and key communities to engage. We'll also have a think about group coordination and leadership. So I'm hoping this meeting is going to work. I've just have 2 questions in a meeting. The first one is to pop a pin on the map of the world showing where you are, or if it's something that you'd like to do, maybe you could even say where you might like to be, but probably where you are might be more useful information for us. So I've got the QR code there and there's the code number. The second question that you'll come across is, in what way do you interact with digital research infrastructure? So when you get to that question, just note that you'll need to scroll to the end of the options and click the submit button for those responses to be tallied.
Sorry, when I try to push the code, it asks me to sign up for free.
Yeah, me too.
So I'm not sure the code is the right one.
It is the right code, but I think we're at the end of the presentation, Kylie. You may have to go back.
Okay. Oh, we just need to jump back. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I need to click present, that's my problem. So there we go. If someone could click this thumbs up to show that you're in the Menti, that would be fantastic. Excellent, thank you. Okay. So let's go to the first question. So just tap roughly on the map where you are. And now if I share my...
Do you want to share your screen?
Yep. And then we will be able to see the results. Okay, so we've got...
Mine shows me being in the middle of Africa, which is incorrect. So I won't press submit.
That's classic. Where are you actually, Rory?
In Scotland.
Click over Scotland.
Oh, you got to.
Who's in?
Oh, there we go. Got it.
Yep.
Thank you, Andrew.
Perfect.
Who's in the Indian Ocean?
Dale is doing long distance swimming training.
Oh,
That's
okay.
right.
Okay. So let's go. Next question. So now if you just click as many of these as apply to you and click the submit button, and we should see a bar graph starting to appear. There we go. Okay, interesting mixed bag of people there. The people who selected other, would you maybe, if you don't mind, either speaking up or putting in the chat what your relation is with digital research infrastructure that fits the other category? Strategist, of course, advisors. Excellent. Good to see. Thank you. Okay, it's nice to have a small group and we can get a little bit more individual about this.
Rory's added creator and service provider.
Thanks. I saw that. That's a good one.
I'm putting those in the notes.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, so just as a bit of background to this group, for anyone who hasn't come across this group before, it started as a BOF session at the last RDA plenary in October last year. And there was sort of enough interest that we thought, okay, we can establish an RDA group on this topic. So the thinking behind it was that research infrastructure uptake, so thinking about how to define what uptake is, which we will explore a little bit later, how to capture it, how to measure it, and how to evaluate it, is of interest to many stakeholders. So the sorts of groups that we were just looking at, so researchers, funders, policy advocates across a digital research system. So some of the questions we're going to be looking at are how do we define uptake and digital research infrastructure? How can we evaluate or assess that uptake in a meaningful way? And what are the different stakeholders' needs when it comes to documenting or reporting on uptake, and how do we balance those needs? Okay. So to identify, I guess, some other perspectives that we want to bear in mind when thinking about these sorts of issues, we now have two lightning talks. Andrew Treloar is first cab off the rank. So Dr. Andrew Treloar has an academic background in digital humanities, and he's worked in the digital research infrastructure space for the last 20 years. He ran the project to establish the Australian National Data Service, and he was part of the group that worked to set up the Research Data Alliance, where he served as co-chair of the Technical Advisory Board for 7 years with Francois. He is currently Director International Strategy for the Australian Research Data Commons. And maybe more importantly, he still prioritises time to play with his grandkids and work in his veggie garden, which is fantastic. So I will stop sharing, and it's all over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thanks, Kylie. So it's just a matter of finding which of the millions of windows I've got open. There we go. So I would just like to do a quick talk on some work that I've been involved in over the last few years, looking at the Global Open Research Commons, and in particular, what we were looking at in trying to develop our model and some of the adoption stories as instances of uptake of DRI. So this is actually two pieces of work that feed into one another. So one is the development of the Global Open Research Commons typology of essential elements, and one is the international model. So one of these was an interest group that then spun off a working group, but the two of them inform one another. And they were driven by the picture on the left, which is that there are lots of different initiatives around the world, some of which interrelate with one another, most of which operate independently. And we're trying to see, okay, how do you stitch these national and pan-national efforts together into something that looks like a true global open research commons? Spoiler alert, we're still working on that. The roadmap that the interest group is producing is still a work in progress. So the interest group is probably best known for this thing, which we call the typology of essential elements, which is why none of us work in marketing. Some people call it the hexagon diagram. And this was us looking at a series of existing commons and trying to abstract out of that what are the essential elements that each commons should have. Now, this diagram doesn't say how you should do each of these. It just says you should have all of these things. It's a little bit like your food groups. You know, you need to eat at least one of each of the elements in the food groups each day. Here, you need to have at least something in each of these quadrants. There's a document that's linked from the URL at the bottom, the DOI at the bottom, which goes into much more detail. But very quickly, the three mid-blue elements across the bottom are what you might think of as the technical infrastructure, the underpinning compute and storage and network and access and authentication infrastructure, the research objects that the Commons is managing, data, publications, perhaps software, and the services and tools that the Commons provides. Across the top, the white hexagons are the non-technical elements that are essential to make the Commons work. The people that are going to support it, the way you get access to it and contribute to it, the governance structures that mean that the Commons is going to be well run and endure, engagement with your users, and a sustainability piece, that is making sure that you're thinking about how the Commons will be sustained, because if researchers are going to use this for the next 10 or 20 years, they want to be sure that it's still going to be around. As well, we spun off a working group, and what the working group did was it looked at a speaker series with 12 different speakers from Commons around the globe, looked at websites for existing initiatives, did a detailed questionnaire that was completed by each speaker, did a literature review, looked at outputs from relevant RDA groups, and did a ongoing process of community consultation. And in particular, we were looking at how you boil all of this information down into a coherent, more detailed model, more detailed than the hexagons, more detailed model of the things that you should consider in either building a commons or describing a commons. And we had a series of task groups with over 60 people involved that were charged with refining the model. The speaker series, I think I could describe this as some of the usual suspects. So someone called Francois Genova, who I've never heard of, spoke about the International Virtual Observatory Alliance. So this is an example, if you like, of a discipline commons. We had a number of national commons. You can see there Japan, Australia, Korea, Canada, Brazil. We had some regional commons, the Nordic infrastructure collaboration, the European Open Science Cloud. So kind of a real mix of different kinds of things, national, pan-national discipline. And the result of that is what we're calling an international model, which is at the moment a spreadsheet from hell, which we're trying to convert into something a little bit more sensible. But the interesting thing for the point of view of this group is the adoption stories. So we have a number of people that are taking this model and working out how to apply it. So one of those is Elixir, which is a life sciences infrastructure run out of the EU, where this guy, Volmar Nyberg Åkerström, is looking at how to apply the GORC model to the existing set of Elixir nodes. We have Laurens Seesink and Maarten Hogewerf from SURF in the Netherlands. So SURF is a large infrastructure provider to many of the Dutch universities. For those of my Australian colleagues, this is kind of like all of DDERP lumped into one organization. And we have a proposal which was developed by Rory McNeil, who is on this call, and Philip Concept from the Universiteit Tromsø, who proposed a open research commons for Norway called Reason. And so here you have the two adoption stories on the left are taking the model and applying it to existing infrastructure. The case study on the right is using the model to design a new infrastructure, if you like. And I will stop there.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Andrew. Fantastic to be able to put that into the bigger international perspective. So I'll just share my screen again. And so for our second lightning talk today, I would like to welcome Françoise Genova, who wears many hats and I'm sure needs no introduction to most people here. There's a big long list of them there. I think the relevant one for this particular talk is that she's a co-chair of the Evaluation of Research Interest Group. I watched the recording of their earlier session and I believe it will be repeated at some point during the plenary, so I encourage you all to get to that or at least contribute to the notes if you can. So over to you, Françoise.
Thank you, Kylie. Yes, the repeat session of evaluation of research is tonight for me. So tomorrow morning for the Australian colleagues who are online, please, you are very welcome to participate. So we have a much shorter history in RDA than Andrew, because the group was created last year. And so we are beginning to understand the landscape. And the first output of the group is a document which is on which we welcome comments about the RDA role in the evaluation of research landscape. So really, when thinking about adoption of research infrastructures, it's clear that it can be linked somehow to evaluation of research, and we still have to understand why. So I only have a few words to say today, but I think it's important that we build a liaison between what you will do and what we do in evaluation of research. So the initial thoughts on my side is that we all know that the uptake of digital research infrastructures by the research community is a necessary condition to enable open research. So it's really important to be able to measure it one way or another when people try to begin to assess what is going on the front on the open research front. And I know in France we have indicators about open research which are built at the national level. So we have to keep this kind of usage in mind. And these kind of parameters can inform policymakers about the uptake of open research. So if we have to use, if this kind of parameter is to be used, I think one of the things we will need is a standard to measure the uptake. And this could be something you think about, because otherwise, there are many research infrastructures. So if we can go towards a common way of measuring their uptake, it's the only way to build indicators which aggregate measurements. And so this is a possible path for work, but it will not be easy, but it will be useful if you take it. Then this was in general. And then if I go to the uptake of specific one given DRA, I am also from the Strasbourg Astronomical Data Center, which is serving the international community. So I have this part in mind also. As a digital research infrastructure, we are evaluated all the time, or very often, by the people who give us money, and eventually at the national level. My own one is on the national research infrastructure roadmap. So it is regularly evaluated to remain on that roadmap. So if we can measure the uptake, it's of course an indicator for the people who evaluate this digital research infrastructure. But what is very often forgotten is that the people who work in the infrastructure are also evaluated. And this can include researchers. And the uptake of their infrastructure is a measurement of the impact of their work. And so this is also useful eventually for the evaluation of the individuals who are working. It also includes support and support staff, engineers, the people who do the data stewards and so on. Having an idea of the uptake of the infrastructure is a good input for evaluating their own impact, and it's useful for the evaluation, their individual evaluation by their authorities. So that's it. And I already said that we should continue to talk together because I think we have to understand how all we can fit together. The landscape of evaluation of research is very complex, with people, with initiatives in many places at many levels. And we try, the evaluation of research interest group is trying to gather the information about what is going on in RDA, which can be useful in that landscape. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Francoise, and completely agree. We definitely need to have open communication between our groups to get all of this working together. And yes, that is something we will look at, which relevant communities should be trying to engage with and possibly how. So for the next part of our session, I would like to hand over to my colleague Stephanie to do some work on putting together a charter. So Stephanie, are you happy for me to keep sharing slides, or would you like to drive from here?
I think you can, we probably have to tag team a bit, but we'll see how we go. So again, thanks everyone for joining the session. What we'd like to do and what we need your help for is we have started to draft a charter for this interest group, but we'd really like a sanity check. And some of the questions we have are we covering the relevant use cases or user scenarios? What's missing? What did we get wrong? Do the group's objectives make sense? What should the outcomes from the group look like? What would you need? What would be needed to make sure the group's outputs and outcomes are useful to you? And then later on, what can we actually realistically achieve in 12 months? How should we structure the group's work? What would you suggest? What communities should we engage in? How? And how? And also, we will ask you in the next steps if you're interested in contributing to the group, and if so, what you would like to contribute or how you would like to contribute, and whether you're interested in being one of the group's drivers. But let's just go to the first section. So what we'll do here is we have a slide with instructions, and then I think I'll start sharing the group document. So if you wouldn't mind, please go to the collaborative session notes and let us know if you can't access them or if you have any trouble editing them. And take maybe 5 minutes to have a look at the section under the first blue box, question 1. And we would like you to have a look at those. And I've actually added 2 use cases that were just brought up. So 2 stakeholder types that were just brought up in the discussion earlier. Let me just see if I can share this. Okay. So that's, can you see that? Is that okay?
Yes, we can see it. Thanks, Stephanie.
Good. So this is basically the first question, and I'm just trying to move this up, but it doesn't want to do what I want it to do. No, I don't want to do that either. There we go. That's better. So we have a question here. There's a section here on use cases, user scenarios, and that's not very detailed. So by all means, feel free to just rip it to shreds. That's perfectly okay. So please take about 5 minutes to have a look at this section and add your thoughts, your insights. Do the use cases make sense? Can you add anything? Does anything not make sense? Are there any use cases we are missing? And after those 5 minutes, if you wouldn't mind taking about 2 minutes to read what other people have written, and maybe add a plus to something that you think makes particular sense. And then we'll have a couple of minutes, 5 to 8, to discuss what's been voted on, and maybe depending on how many upvotes we get, we can discuss the whole set of use cases, if that's okay. Does that make sense?
Clear as mud.
Okay, because I can't see anyone anymore. I don't know if people are frantically leaving or doing stuff. Oh, excellent. I can see someone typing. That's cool. If you struggle getting into the document or have an issue with editing it, let us know, or put your contributions in the chat and we can just copy them over.
If you have a suggestion for a new use case, we just put a new bullet point in. Is that the way to do that?
Yep. So I've just I put in the 2 that were, yes, thank you, that were listed earlier. So I've put in the policymakers and the creators. So yes, by all means, just put extra bullet points in and just write whatever you think makes sense there. Thank you very much.
Okay, those are new categories of people, but they're not a new category of
use cases. That's right. So yeah. I just took in, I just put in the types of stakeholders, if you like. So if you have suggestions for what their use cases would look like, that would be fantastic.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Stephanie, is the document that people are apparently typing into linked from the collaborative notes? Because I'm in the charter link from the collaborative notes.
No, it's the collaborative notes document itself. If you go down,
stay away from the charter.
Yes.
Okay.
So you probably missed the instructions because you were looking after your chooks.
Indeed. It's either that or have them be attacked by foxes, and it was anyway.
Is about another minute enough time?
We do still have some typing going on, but yeah,
Okay,
let's
that's
keep
fine.
it to just a minute or so.
Yep.
Yes, I am typing in suggestion mode, but I can do it in just including the text. So you can choose. You
That's
tell
fine.
me.
Thanks. That's also very helpful because we see who typed it. So if we have questions, we can come back to you. That's great. Okay, I think. Oh no, there's still typing going on. That's great. If you're not typing, please take a couple of minutes to read what others have written and maybe give us a plus where you agree with something. And feel free to extend or add to those comments. Oh, great. Evaluators of DRI. That's actually, yes. We hadn't gotten that there, I don't think. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes to discuss the user scenarios and use cases section. Did anyone want to make any specific? Oh, great, there's lots of pluses coming in. Did anyone want to make any specific comments on anything that they've read or written? If not, I probably have a question for Françoise about the policymakers. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you meant by when establishing a national, regional, institutional DRI policy? So what would be things that would be of use to policymakers at that point?
Yes, I was thinking about the roadmap and also the national plan for open science. So I think that it's useful to have an idea of the uptake because it can guide the national policy of which, at the national level, you can recommend DRAs, and to have an idea of the uptake can help you to select the DRAs you recommend and to support the DRAs you think are important and the uptake does not look sufficient. So I really think, and I was telling when in my earlier that if you establish a national roadmap for research infrastructure, you will tend to use the uptake as a criterion to say that the GRIs you put in the roadmap are mature enough to be in the roadmap because they are already uptaken by the community.
Okay, thanks. One thing we have talked about in the previous session that we held at the last plenary was what do we actually mean by uptake? And I think that's actually one of the things we will need to define, because there was a comment that we got, and we agree with that, that numbers are not everything. So if you have a digital research infrastructure that has a small group of users, but they cure cancer, that's probably better than having a digital research infrastructure with 5 million users that never do anything useful with it. So there is something there about not just looking at sheer naked numbers. And in fact,
So without,
yeah.
So Stephanie, without wishing to stray into the discussion we're having earlier on this afternoon, that feels to me like you've just described an impact thing
Yes,
rather than an uptake thing.
that is true. And that's actually leading us to the next question, which is the objectives and outcomes of the group. So again, if you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes to read the section and add your insights on this. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about there was, what are we actually trying to do with this group? So what's the scope? So on the one hand, I think we need to define what we mean by digital research infrastructure, because that seems to be one of those words where everyone thinks they know what it means, but no one has really defined it properly. And the other, okay, good point. And the other thing is the word uptake, because that tends to be taken as numbers. Is uptake the best thing to look at? When we started this whole idea of doing this particular group, we actually started out talking about impact, and then we thought, well, impact is a big topic. Before we can get to impact, we probably have to look at uptake. That may be wrong. That may be not the best way of doing this. So your thoughts here about what we should be doing or what the group should be doing would be very much appreciated. And we've also got a couple of outcomes or outputs that we've defined there. Again, it would be interesting to know, do these make sense? Are there things that you would find useful, or are there things that particular people would find useful, or what's missing? What would you like to see? And can you give us any additional information on, if these things make sense to you, what would make them particularly useful to you? Okay, thanks for your contribution so far. If it's okay, you can certainly start looking at what's been written and add your pluses. Okay, can I just ask the last point in the outcomes? Someone said a typology of categories would be very useful, and Francoise said a draft version should be established from the start to guide the survey. What categories are we talking about? Is this user categories or measures or?
Measures.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry,
Mhm.
if you look above, I said related to defining scope, you could look at first what the categories, i.e. what the categories of the research infrastructure are, e.g. research
Ah,
commons, research cloud, science gateways, VREs. And so what
okay. Yep.
I
Yep.
was suggesting is coming up with a typology of categories of research infrastructures, as it seems to me that's kind of a foundational thing. Otherwise, we don't really know what
Yep.
we're talking about. But yeah.
But I think we have to think about the categories of possible categories of measures also. But it may come later. But I agree with Rory, it's a starting point to have a category of research infrastructures. And we saw in the GORC exercise that there are many different kinds. Well, maybe not many, several.
Sorry, Francoise, I missed the first part. What was the categories you were proposing?
I was proposing to have a category of
Measures.
possible measures.
Okay. Yep, that sounds good. There's
And
no reason not to have
sorry,
both.
not only measures, but also I agree with the mention of qualitative outputs, qualitative evaluation. So of uptake, and I think we have to be careful to always add qualitative when we speak about measures, just to make sure we are not going to add an H index to a landscape.
Yeah, no, that's not the plan. And to be honest, I am happier with qualitative um, numbers. Yeah, numbers look so factual, and sometimes they can be so skewed. So I think we need both, basically.
The difficulty is that you need the numbers if you want to aggregate things. So it's really tricky. But so you need both somehow.
Mhm. Yep. Okay. So I think the idea of defining uptake and not just make sure that we don't look at numbers only and possibly look at impact seems to have quite a few agreements, which is good. If there are any other things that you particularly agree with, please note your pluses. So I think in a way, this one here, the survey of different users, of different user groups, and then the supporting output that would lead on from that based on the survey. I think the first thing we'd have to do is work out who are all our users. So thank you for all your contributions. I think, or use what are all our stakeholder types, let's call it that. So thanks for all your input into the first question. So that would be a draft list of stakeholders that we would want to survey. And we would want to work out in more detail their use cases and needs. And hopefully then we would be able to work on that and develop some recommendations for the different stakeholders or stakeholder types on what measures of uptake might make sense, in what circumstances, quantitative and qualitative, and how we could capture or track them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, Stephanie. Yeah,
Okay,
and
good.
I think we're all heading in the same direction here, which is great.
Yep, that's pretty cool. Okay. I think that's probably all of the comments for the moment in here. Is there anything anyone would like to bring up so we can discuss that in a little bit more detail here? Or do you think this is sort of, yeah, you've said it all in writing? Okay, then we could move on to the next bit. Okay, Andrew, you had a question there. Is that resolved? About the use cases and whether that meant more than what DRIs are using it for and for what?
Yes, that's resolved. That was the point
Okay.
of my final comment there. Yeah.
Okay,
But
good.
thanks for checking.
Okay, so bearing in mind, and we're starting from a blank slate there a little bit, bearing in mind the outcomes that we have here, and I think I'll just copy them over. It's going to be a little bit messy, but let's just do that. So if these are our proposed outcomes, outputs in some cases, do you have any thoughts on what we could do in the first 12 months as a group? So there seems to be a logical order that the survey would have to come before the recommendation, obviously. But what would be how would we structure the work for the first 12 months, and what would be the order in which we would be potentially doing those things? So what can we do in parallel? So it sounds like this would be one of the first things to do, would be my guess. This is probably one of the later things to do, and whether we would get to that within 1 year, hopefully we would, but there's a possibility that not. How would the other things sit in there, and what do you think would be, well, tasks, milestones that we would need to do to get to those? If you have any insights there, any suggestions, that would be particularly helpful.
Stephanie,
Yep.
could I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Is there do you plan to do a literature review somewhere? Because I just wondered if there's already some work done in this area.
Good point. That would probably be, so we have done a tiny one when we were starting to think about this, but that was more about, definitions of digital research infrastructures, a little bit of an overview what's actually been going on, and we haven't spent that much time on it. So that's certainly a good question. Would that be an early output, you think, or an early thing to do?
I think it might be useful because we can, based on that material, we can design the survey and have an idea of what we can draw from what has already been done, and then try and address some of the gaps or build on what we think is good that's gone before.
Yep, that makes sense. So, okay, thanks to whoever's writing that. So a literature review, that could be a very first task, or one of the very first tasks, and it could be an early output, even if it's not fully written up, but it could be something that might be of use, even if it's just a bibliography or something like that. But it also would guide the survey instrument design. Sorry.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And that's also something where we could basically ask the group to contribute anything that they know about. So basically have basically a big spreadsheet, and people can contribute things that they know about, and we can then work with them.
Yes, that'd be great. And particularly if people are based in different countries, they would be aware of what's happening in their local area. So, and then yeah, that would help give a more international perspective.
Yeah, that would be great. So the anonymous Kiwi has written this here. Would you mind, because you said you would be glad to contribute from your perspective in the biomedical field, would you mind putting your name there? Just so we know who this is? Because that sounds really great. Veronica, thank you. Okay. So the literature review would be one thing. The definition of the scope of the group probably would have to be unpacking the question of uptake impact, and also what do we mean by DRIs. So that could potentially occur in parallel. So I feel like this one would be yeah, sort of final-ish for the end of a year. Would that be realistic?
Sorry, Stephanie, which one are you talking about?
That was the development of at least one supporting output outlining recommendations for various stakeholder groups on what measures of uptake may make sense.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, great, Liv. That would be wonderful if you could provide that somewhere. We might actually have to start a spreadsheet, unless anyone here is really good with Zotero. I'm not. Okay, I think we'll probably have to sort of do a bit more work on how the timelines would work, like what we would do when, how long these things would roughly take. So a literature review, what kind of time frame would people think would make sense for this? Is that something we could do in 2 months? Is that something we could do faster, slower?
Stephanie, I think it really
Yeah.
depends on how familiar people are with the literature.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is the Lorenz workshop that I referenced earlier.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of people there who were researchers into knowledge infrastructures, mm-hmm, who were all familiar with an entire literature that I didn't even know existed. Now, it might be possible to do it in two months if you had someone who had half a day or half of their 0.5 of their time to work on it. Or they knew the literature already. But I think if we were coming in cold, and this is an area where I don't know the literature, and we don't have a dedicated resource, I suspect it's going to take a while.
Okay, so what would you guess?
I feel like it'd be, if someone was doing it a day a week and they didn't know the space, 3 months probably.
So I
if
was
it's being
hoping
done by volunteer work, then
yeah. I was hoping we could get people to contribute what they know and hopefully cover quite a bit that way without everyone having to do everything.
Yeah, and that would be a good start. But the catch for me would be, how do you know what you don't know? How do you know that there's this huge literature over there that you've missed?
That is true.
And also, Stephanie, even everyone can, many people contribute in the end, you still need someone to synthesize all the.
That is true.
That takes time as well. So yeah, Andrew said 3 months to 5 or 6, depends on how many people, how many resources.
I mean, I guess I'm just thinking about the kind of literature review you do at the start of a PhD. I'm not suggesting this is a PhD. I'm not suggesting it's that bad, but yeah, it just takes a while to track stuff down.
Even you write a paper, it takes some time to.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thinking that through, I mean, maybe what might be realistic in the first 12 months is doing that desktop literature review and survey. And then that question you had earlier, Stephanie, of the supporting output with recommendations for various stakeholders, what uptake may make sense and how to capture and track it is going to be out beyond 12 months, probably closer to 18 or even 24.
I think that makes sense, Kali, that first 12 months to these two activities, literature review and the survey, then because the survey result itself is good supporting output, then you recommend those guidelines or that you could start a working group on that.
So yeah.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I do think that recommendations document is a good longer term goal, and these other activities are feeding into that, informing that document.
So I just put a couple of timelines there. So Veronica suggested the establishing guidelines regarding the use of open data. And so how long do you think something like that would take? And yeah, how long do you think that would take, and what kinds of resources would be needed?
So maybe this is a question for Veronica, but
Yes.
who is the user? Is it use of open data just by the authors who submit to publications, or is it the use of the open data by the publishers themselves? Or does that not make sense as a question?
Well, basically, in my experience, and that's the reason, I mean, which I suggested, I mean, to be really focusing on this area and so on, is that the use of the data by the authors, yeah?
Yes.
And
yeah.
basically, yeah, exactly. And actually, due to the fact that a large amount of data from clinical databases and so on is available, yeah? The people are using it indiscriminately, yeah? And based on that data, they are doing a very easy type of analysis, yeah? And they are publishing it like an original article. However, many of the people who send those papers are not knowledgeable in the field that they are submitting the paper. I'm talking particularly about the biomedical field, which is very risky, very dangerous, very irresponsible, and they are creating really a mess up in the field. So that's the reason that I think it should be taken very seriously and acting quite quickly in this regard.
Okay, so that all makes sense to me. Thank you. But that seems then that the heading for that bullet point should just be authors. It doesn't sound like that's a publisher responsibility because I don't see how publishers could. Well, no, maybe not.
No.
Maybe
Well,
publishers.
the point is the following: the authors send the paper to the journal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the journal designs and submits that paper to an editor. I'm talking because I'm acting in that role, so I'm familiar. I mean, I was engaged in these positions. I was acting as editor, appointed editor, since I'm associate editor of one of the journals. I was receiving this type of publications as a reviewer quite oftenly, and in this short time many times, and particularly dealing with authors which did not produce the data. So always the data was retrieved from databases. It was only a very basic statistical analysis. Yeah. However, they are using and they are selling the publication like original work. Yeah. From when they are also telling that the publication received funding from a funding agency. So, that's here there are many stakeholders involved. So the funders, which probably these people got funding, but for doing research, not for doing data analysis, on a field which they are not knowledgeable. So the publication is very poorly written, probably assisted by an AI tool, which is never disclosed. And you have papers which have 10, 15 authors. Yeah, and none of them are knowledgeable about this field, which is really frightening. And I'm
okay, so so I understand now. So it's a question about publisher policies, it's a question about author guidelines, and maybe a question about funder policies as well.
Yeah, and also if the databases, yeah, who make those large amount of data, because I'm not talking about a few patients. There are databases which has data about 15,000 and so on and so on and so on. So there are very large databases which are very hard to produce, very hard to manage and so on. Yeah, and I don't know if they are aware how their data are used, because, for example, the data is produced in one country or one continent, and the data are used indiscriminately, yeah, by people from elsewhere.
Okay, so thanks for this discussion. I think we have to move on a little bit, but let's talk about that in a bit more detail at a later stage, if that's okay. So thanks, Veronica, and thanks, Andrew. The next bit we wanted to talk to you about was the communities that we would need to engage with. So what we have done here is we have listed a whole range of communities and groups within the Research Data Alliance, but that may not be comprehensive. And in fact, Andrew earlier mentioned the National Data Services, which used to be an RDA interest group, then went into hibernation for a while and seems to have come back. So our questions here would be, which groups or which communities do you think we should engage with? Or also outside of RDA, so are there communities that you know of that the group should be engaging with and working with? But also, for example, Francois spoke about the evaluation of research interest group. Andrew spoke about the GORC interest and working groups. So hopefully Francois and Andrew would be basically people we could consult or we could use as liaisons with those groups. But are there any other groups, communities who you think we should be working with, and where you could help us to engage? That would be also very valuable for us to know. So if you could just spend a couple of minutes on that, that would be great. Okay, yeah, funding bodies. And if you have any good ideas how the group could interact with them, that would be great as well. Does the Research Data Architectures and Research Institutions group have a session at this plenary?
Yes, we just had a single session. It was really interesting. And if
Pity.
Dale is still here, thank you. She helped us to put it together. It was looking at research infrastructures in Latin America and Africa. And I think the recording must be available by now. We did it last week. I thought it was, personally, I thought it was a great session. So it was quite interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that was one of the ones that really didn't work for us time-wise. But yeah, if the recording is up, then we certainly can have a look at it. And yes, that would be great to have a chat. Okay, data policy standardization implementation.
Especially if the topic proposed by Veronica is tackled, because it's really in their own landscape, I think. And they have publishers.
Yep. Okay, the mapping the landscape, the RDA Oracle for Research, mapping the landscape. Rory, is that you as well?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. All the PIT groups, okay. Okay, that sounds good. Andrew, hopefully we could use you as a liaison with Gork.
Yeah,
Gork
that would make it. Yep, that would make perfect sense.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to track down the architectures group.
Which one?
The research data architectures group that Rory just mentioned.
That's the Research Data Architectures and Research Institutions. That's on the list, and there's a link to the group.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the link to the video.
Ah, okay. Sorry, you're looking for the recording. That's great. Thanks.
Yeah.
I think that given your penchant for puns, you Australians will appreciate the fact that this is surely the most awkwardly named group in all of the RDA. Ardari, that's what it's called.
There'd be some competition for that one, surely.
Okay, that's great. Any other community? Yeah, sorry, Francois.
I have a comment. It's good that you think about the groups you have to establish a liaison with, but it's good that on your side, you know who will be the contact person for each of the group. So I have put that in the notes. But it's important because we need to know who to talk to, and you need to know who to talk to also.
Yeah, I think we need to have bidirectional. Like it would be great if, for example, you were a member of our group and whoever from us. I mean, I'm already a member of your group, so I could be the person, for example. But yeah, I think that sort of thing we'd have to do. Oh, great! There's the recording. Cool.
And I couldn't find it because, of course, the session title has nothing to do with the name of the group. It's Data Management Challenges and Solutions for Research Institutions in Africa and Latin America.
Okay. But thanks for putting that in. Yes, the Funders Forum. That's a good point, actually, Francoise. Is that still alive?
I think the Funders Forum, my understanding is likely alive. I am not sure their interest group is still alive. So this has to be checked because they had a funders and other stakeholder interest group. And I am not sure what happened to that group.
Okay,
but
so that's the research. Yeah.
So the Funders Forum is definitely alive because it's got a meeting scheduled for the 24th of this month. But it's an email list and a Zoom meeting. I don't think the associated interest group is still active.
Okay.
But you know, in Göteborg, we were invited by the Funders Forum to talk about evaluation of research. So you can establish a liaison between an interest group and the Funders Forum, and they listen. They are interested in discussing.
Okay. So we might want to put something together that could be shared with them. Okay. Okay. Now we've got about 13 minutes left. So any other comments on this? Anything that we haven't really considered, or anything that you would like the group to look at? So by all means, we'll probably go back to the wrap up and the next steps for this group. But feel free to please add more things here, even after the session, if there's anything else that comes to your mind. So we're not gonna take this document away. So we'll leave that open, and we will hopefully start working on our charter, but definitely not this week, in more detail. Yes, Francoise?
Comment on what we said previously. You have a web page for the group, so if people are logged in with their RDA credential, they are able to join the group. It's just a comment which can be useful for the participants.
Yes, and we actually have that on our slides. So that
sorry.
is certainly no, that's fine. That's great. And in fact, we would like to ask people to join the group if they're interested in this topic, and also to, by all means, spread the word. And if there are other people you know that who might be interested in this topic, please let them know, and they're welcome to join as well. Okay, I might hand back to Kylie then at this point, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks so much, Stephanie. That was fantastic. Really nice bit of discussion there amongst everybody, and lots of different perspectives too, which was what we were hoping to get and happen on the day, which is brilliant.
And lots of input. So thank you all very much.
Yes, thank you. We're going to have a good time digesting all of that as well. So got the link in the slides there, but I think that link is actually in the collaborative notes document, so you can all come and join our group. Also email Stephanie, Liv or me if you're interested in becoming a co-chair and progressing this. That would be very much appreciated. So, sorry, Stephanie, were you going to say something?
I was going to say something, and that is, at the moment, this group looks like an ARDC, or the co-chairs at least look like an ARDC event. So we are aware of the fact that that is not what this group should be about. So we would really appreciate it if other people were interested in helping us and becoming a co-chair of this group and driving the group, shaping the group, having influence on what this group actually does. we do know if we put the charter in that's going to get knocked back by TAB straight away, saying, well, no, we don't, we're not interested in one organization interest groups. So the current co-chairs are very much preliminary just to get this off the ground.
Absolutely, and it did make organising this meeting a lot easier, all being in the same organisation. But no, we do need to have much broader representation.
Yeah. And that wouldn't, I mean, we wouldn't be able to do this because we are just one organisation with one type of stakeholders. That would be pretty incestuous, really.
Absolutely. So yes, as we were saying before, it's about now raising awareness within RDA and engaging with those communities. So I guess we need to figure out actual names, as Francois mentioned, to form those links with those other groups, recruiting more members. One thing we didn't talk about was regular meetings, but I guess we might have a sense of monthly to get the ball rolling. What do people think?
So yeah, I mean, that's a little bit for the group members to think about. So my suggestion would be that we start, well, that we probably would send something around to the group members maybe towards the end of the month and try if we can work out a meeting time for a first meeting in June, hopefully before the Northern Hemisphere summer holidays really kick in. And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, it's not just Northern Hemisphere holidays, it's before Southern Hemisphere people go to the Northern Hemisphere for those holidays, isn't it?
Yes, there's that.
Okay. And yes, we've got lots of work to do there on that group charter and to submit for endorsement, of course.
So on that, I would suggest that we take all the input we've collected today and work that into our draft charter, which at the moment is basically a discussion between a couple of us. So we'll clean that up, and we'll also link from the RDA group page to that charter, and of course to the session notes document. And then that would be one thing to have another closer look at in June, I would think.
Yeah, completely agree. And then the group can take it from there. Now, do I have any next? So yes, that's actually brought us to the end of the content that we've prepared. I feel like we have covered so much ground in the last hour and a half, which has been fantastic. We do still have a few minutes left. Has anybody had any further thoughts that they would like to share with the group before we wrap up? Sorry, my kids have just got home from school and they're thumping a lot in the background. Okay, well, that's the quietest this group has been in the last 90 minutes, so I think we might call it there. Thank you so much, everybody, for your very, very active participation. We were sort of going, oh, how's that going to work? But no, we've had a really lively discussion, lots of verbal interaction, and we've got, I think, pretty much everything in writing in the collaborative notes, so it's easy to refer back to. As Stephanie mentioned earlier, that collaborative notes, we will keep open for a bit longer, at least to the end of the plenary, I think. So if you have another thought at 1 o'clock in the morning and it's got to go in, then you can absolutely put it in or contact one of us and we can add that in for you.
And also, if you know any other people who you think might want to have input into this, feel free to share this with anybody. And yeah, we're happy to take more input, and we're also happy to answer any questions or have a chat.
Yeah, tell your mates. So yeah, thanks so much, everybody, and hopefully get to meet you all in person in Brisbane next year. That would be awesome. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.